All right, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Not really. This is kind of a part two, right to response to episode 625, which was, of course, the lads getting together for their preview review of the forthcoming War Machine book. I thought it'd be useful just to recap some of the stuff that they raised in the podcast and address some viewer comments, since I obviously couldn't participate in that episode yesterday, other than phoning in a couple of pre-recorded videos on, number one, the status of the cover. And that was one thing that seemed to go just a little bit askew during the show. And I want to make absolutely clear the delays, resulting from trying to finalize use of the intellectual property on the Claudio Bergamin Creatures cover, is not a matter of friction or angst. There's nothing like that involved in it. There's no bad relationship with Pop House. I'm simply trying to do things right, and it's very important to me to set a positive tone with the new ownership of the intellectual property. I had a relationship with the KISS office previously, where I would always keep them informed of projects. I was always respective or willing to take feedback of things, and I have to offer that to the new ownership. That's simply right and proper. KISS is a band that I love, but I am a fan, and they are the band, and in this case, they are a brand with commercial rights that have to be represented when I operate in a commercial in a commercial field, simply because that is business and there are rules around business. So don't take any of the comments to think that there's anything negative about the situation, because there most certainly isn't. If anything, like I said in a comment during the brief time I was able to tune into the show, there's simply right now a mismatch in my expectations of timeline and the new reality. It really is as simple as that. I want to take the opportunity also to thank Daniel, Ken, Lonnie, and Mark for taking the time, number one, to scour through the semi-final draft of the book. There have been a couple of changes made since that version that they went through, not least the cover, in case that's the one I launched with this week. But to go through something, to review it is a little bit different a process than having to consume it, for pleasure. So thank you guys, and thanks for the objectivity. Obviously, that was something else that was raised in the viewers' comments. I think Ghost Sounds mentioned it's hard to get too critical with a pair. Yeah, it is. And, there'll be hopefully plenty of other podcasts who maybe will be interested in doing discussions around this book, or at least using this book to frame a discussion around the tour, the music, their experiences. We're not the only ones with a panelist who went to multiple shows on the Creatures tour, and we're certainly not the only podcast to have participants with opinions and pontifications ready to flow about any topic, no matter what. So, yeah, Daniel's always somewhat brutally objective. Maybe the second language comes into play. He doesn't soften his words. He says what he says, and all of the guys I think are able to separate our friendship and our partnership on the podcast, because again, they are KISS fans, and that was one of the points that I stressed, that this is going to be something that is put out there for KISS Army. So being objective and honest about it serves that purpose, because again, I'm not trying to mislead fans, and I certainly don't want to make the brand look bad on anything that I do. Those are two very important things. I'm not into ripping anyone off. So they were able to give a much more objective and honest overview of this book and its project from their perspective, having not been involved in its creation, than I would have had I been involved on the show. Let's see, some of the other comments that came up. I've covered delays, covered Vinny. Mark's comments, he would love for me to include a chalk key. Yeah, Mark, I know you love chalk-keys, and that's one of the great things Mark does with the Project Gemini albums, whether it's a poster, bookmarks, bonus music as well for some of the versions that he's done. He's done a great job with his packaging and his all-around accoutrements added into what he releases to the public. So he sets a golden standard as a smaller scale independent artist in doing so. Now, for me, that's a little bit more of a challenge. I do all my fulfillment through Amazon. They print on demand. I don't like handling stock for one reason. I don't like handling returns. Things get damaged in transit. If Amazon doesn't pack something properly and it gets trashed in transit, the customer has a right to have that returned or replaced if it comes in printed upside down. One of my proof copies has a print error. Now, I've used the cover to scribble on with colored Sharpies to see if there are any pens if I want to do a signed copy. So I'll eat that loss on the proof copy, but a customer is not going to tolerate having their interior printed upside down backwards or have the wrong content cut and pasted into the book. That's happened. If you read some of the reviews on some other books that I've done, I think Mask Hysteria has a few negative reviews. People, bashing the book because it came with blank pages or other misprint errors, which simply could be rectified by contacting Amazon customer service and having it replaced. Don't take that out on the bloody author who has no control over it, but why would anyone understand that it has nothing to do with the author? So I'm not taking any shots at the customer. I'm just saying there's an easy mechanism to work around any issues that arise out of fulfillment through Amazon. So that's why I don't do it. There's no way to put on a poster, and that also adds an additional commercial usage right. So if you have a cover designed for a book cover, it's specifically per contract going to be used for that cover, and advertising only in its single form for promoting the book. You can't use it in other forms because those are other commercial rights, which you then have to negotiate separately. And I don't want to do merch with book covers on unless I own the material myself, simply because I don't find that respectful to the artist. I think that should be an additional revenue stream if they so decide to do prints or posters or mugs or mouse mats or whatever. Let them have that, because it's a tough business out there, and I'm strictly licensing artwork for use. So nice idea, Mark. Completely unfeasible for me. And if I do a hardcover, I generally have to self-fulfill those. So I could do a bonus item, but I would much rather, just avoid the complexity involved in that, because again, the hardcovers, if I do those myself, are going to have such a price premium on them that the margins are so tight that to get them out the door, shipped properly, eat a few losses for damaged copies, it just becomes economically unviable. The royalty level that I work at, I work very low, because again, this is more about fan passion than business for these sorts of projects. So one of the most useful comments to come out of yesterday's show, it was Daniel, and Daniel had a formatting critique. Now, Daniel's had this formatting critique before, and it's something that I see out of my Scandinavian friends, that they love columns. I find columns to be very magazine-like. It's something that I've never really considered. For most of the books that I have worked on, the touring histories, I experimented with column layouts previously. I didn't like how it looked. I didn't like how it flowed. And again, I think it's a very personal thing. I think people who maybe read a lot of magazines or see that format used in a large amount of the material that they consume, written material and printed material, it works. But I do agree. It does help some of the sections, and I have actually made changes to the final draft of a few sections, Michael James Jackson, some of the narrative heavy sections, to break those up, and it forced reformatting, but a good part of that was it also brought to light a duplicate image. So I was able to kill that, and then I ended up with an extra page, and I was able to add in some more images. So thank you, Daniel, for that feedback. It's actually helped improve the book, I think. I think I also used it on a couple of the longer tour entries just to break it up. And if nothing else, as you go through the book, going from one sort of text flow to another, hopefully it'll break things up a little bit and maybe rest the eyes. But again, this is the sort of book that you're able to just pick up and open and go. You don't have to go front to back or back to front or whatever. It's pick a tour date, pick a section. Every page basically has a starting point of its own. So that's very kind of useful. They also raised ideas for the future. Well, obviously there is magic, which is humongous. It already pretty much exists. I'm just going through right now, really trying to plug a few gaps. I've mentioned on a few other podcast episodes that it's been problematic with the changes in the government and funding structures in the United States to get into library loans. I've had multiple requests out this year, and can't get anything in from libraries elsewhere. And I do all my work on microfilm. I need that material, and I can't travel around the country going to other libraries. I only did that for Aerosmith. Go to libraries out in the Boston area who wouldn't loan because I had to have that stuff from 1970 specifically. But I can't do that on the scale of Kiss and a book from 1996 with the number of locations involved. Everything was very condensed for the Aerosmith book, making a visit to New England, apart from hanging out with Kim and Andy. Feasible to go driving New Hampshire as well, for that matter. So it's a problem trying to finish up those gaps and get the local reviews for the shows that I need to have in here. Magic will happen. I'm pretty convinced of that. Whether it is completely to my liking or I have to do workarounds on some of those sections, we'll have to wait and see. They also mentioned some of the other things that they'd like. Return of Kiss, I have ones. Here's a sample page right now. So yeah, that's in progress, a Return of Kiss. I just have to figure out how to do a book cover without any Kiss IP on it, which will be quite interesting. Same with Destroyer. Yes, Spirit of 76, I have a tour type scrapbook on the go for that. Here's a sample page from that. Spirit, what is it? The Winter Tour, the Can-Am Tour 76, 77, so the Rock and Roll Over Tour. Yeah, I've got one for that in progress. That's more in the note stage right now, being skeletoned out of how I want that to form. All of this is the next progression. Mark talked about some of the smaller tour-specific publications that I'd done. Those are like $4.99, $7.99 a piece. You know, they were very much created for Kindle, and then the print option was just enabled for people who wanted those in a print format. Those were strictly, done nearly zero royalty, so that people could just have their favorite tour information right then and there. Things change continuously in doing these tour histories, so there's always more being added into the mix. This will never be done. When I'm done, someone else is going to pick up the gauntlet, and hopefully I'll have someone who'll take all of my hundreds of pounds of binders and go with it. The work is not over. There's new avenues of research, new publications always being discovered from the past. So it's never done. It's never over. And thank goodness, because it's such a fascinating area to be involved or interested in. It may bore some people to tears, but I love digging. I absolutely adore digging in the library, going through microfilm or going through online resources and archives as well, for that matter, and doing translations. So I get off on that. I did talk about the Elder Supplement. Here's a little bit of that for you quickly to see. So yeah, that's working on. Recorded history. That was the greatest thing I think I would love to see, but that would require a contractual partnership with both UMG and Bravado and Pop House. You would need access to the vault to do that book. The Beatles author, Mark Lewisham, had that relationship with Apple Corps and was able to get in, listen to stuff, take notes, document everything from the printed material and notebooks that the engineers used when recording the sessions with the Beatles. But you'd have to be able to listen to all of those takes on a reel. You can see some of the reel boxes in the Destroyer box set, the Creatures box set, the Alive, and the Dressed to Kill one. You have to go through each one of those takes and translate what you are hearing into words that make sense to a reader, convey the story of each recording take. Why does it break down? What is the story with it? And then you have to, in some cases, go through it track by track on that reel to see, is bass doing this, is Gene doing the same bass line as on each one of the takes? Is Peter doing the same tom fills or rhythms, or Paul and Ace, what are they doing guitar-wise? So that would be an extraordinarily long-term project that would have to be officially sanctioned. That would make a fantastic history style book, but you have to have track sheets. You have to have real boxes. You have to have audio access. You have to have partnership with those rights owners and contracts in place in order to protect all of that intellectual property, so that you don't have a guy on a podcast waving pictures of CDs that have come out of the vault with the material. Again, trust and commercial viability are probably key considerations to that, but I'm sure that many a KISS fan would love that. But there's also a problem that I don't know of a tremendous amount of in-studio photography of KISS. Obviously, the 73 Bell Sound studio sessions is very well covered by things that everyone has seen. So you'd have people complaining, "Oh, there's nothing new there." I've seen that before because of the photo trading circuit, which we're grateful for, as otherwise we wouldn't see it necessarily. But that means if it's put in a book, people are like, well, blah, why am I paying to see this when I can see it for free? I don't think I've ever seen a photo from a Hotter Than Hell session, a couple of posed ones from the Dress to Kill. I'm not sure if we've seen anything from Alive, though what would be the difference? And Nanuet, I would love to see stuff from inside the theaters when the Capitol, Passaic, and, obviously Nanuet, and maybe even the Army base where they're rehearsing. So, again, how much in-studio shots? 1980, there is Lynn Goldsmith did go in and shot some great pictures. Ace's guitar not plugged in. Gene and Paul doing backing vocals, videos as well. So there were some photos from Unmasked, but what about Dynasty? The Elder, there are shots. Are they contemporaneous or are they prior? Because it was Rayanne Rubinstein who shot some good ones of Ace in the Hole, and there are some other photos which are more generalist. You'll see some in Aceland when that comes out. So yeah, that's a really fantastic idea. I don't think that's necessarily one for me, but I think let's throw that out there to our friends at Pop House, maybe to be able to get the ball rolling with Bravado and UMG. There are people who could be trusted to go into those vaults and who don't go on podcasts and talk about what they've seen or heard. It would need to be a very secret project in order to really protect the material and the information, because no doubt there might be some things that they wouldn't want people to find about. So you really have to trust the people that you engage to work on that project. But we've seen the real boxes, and we know that there's potential there, at least for a data-filled book or publication of some description. And to be perfectly honest, fill it up with photos. Just fill it up with photos, track sheets, real boxes, studio bills. I've got tons of bills from the Elder Sessions, Rock and Roll Over, Destroyer, we got Alive. You've seen some in that product, Dress to Kill. I've got plenty of those, Hotter Than Hell, Bell Sound, and I don't have everything. What else is there, Test pressings. Tell the whole recorded history story about those first mixes of the 73 album and what changed. All right, I'm starting to go on. Let's get to a couple more of the questions. Ghost Sounds I've covered. KissVids ad. So scrapbooks with printed narration. Yeah, essentially. Mask Hysteria, my version of that is sold out. I'm doing most of these scrapbook styled publications as limited editions now, so as not to have an extended commercial period on for their availability. So yeah, it's clippings. Not toenail, newspaper, with other collectibles and ephemera from the period and the era, or for the city. So ticket stubs, I had a whole folder of ticket stubs that I collected 20, 30 years ago, even through, the current day, that just make for a nice eye candy when talking about each one of these tour dates. And what I try to do with each tour date is obviously have the set list, have the review, have the concert gross and attendance, which come from the official publications, or in the case of the Creatures tour, band audits. And I like to have the ad, and I like to have the ticket stub, and I like to transcribe some of the reviews, and I like to have clippings from the local newspaper, either prior to the show or sometimes from letters to the editor from angry residents. And maybe if I can't quite fit in a transcription, then I'll put in the a clipping from a second or third review where shows or cities may have multiple publications reviewing it. Ronnie Parker asks, any pages on Kiss Killers? Absolutely important. And that was, again, this book, War Machine, came about from obtaining some stuff from a storage locker auction following Michael James Jackson's death. And it really starts with his day planners, which don't tell the whole story, but they illuminated quite a bit of the transitional period between the Elder, or the recovery from the Elder, Kiss Killers, Creatures, and Lick It Up and Animalize, because I do have the 84 planners as well, and other bills, a lot more about his history. His 2 contracts that he signed with Kiss. Of course, he signed a specific recording contract that covered both products that came out in 1982, so Kiss Killers and Creatures of the Night. And then at the end of the year, he signed another one to do what became Lick It Up, and that was the one that was Tipexed when Kiss's contract with Phonogram was canceled, but he continued to work with them, of course. So that is the genesis, along with some of the musical assets that I obtained from that auction. That gives rise to a need to dig into this area more. And this was very much happening around the time that the Creatures box was announced, and none of that material could go into or be submitted for potential consideration for use in the book. So that's what gave birth to this project. It was too late for the Creatures box. Some of that information, I mean, you're going to get to see Michael's scribbles, taking down notes on phone calls with Eric of what Eric wanted for studio drum kit equipment, his multiple calls to Aucoin, Glickman Marks, Paul, Gene, even Bob Kulick, Vinny, a lot of the other session players that he was working with at the same time on other projects. He was trying to get James House off the ground. He was working very hard with him, and James put out an album in '83. Nothing like what he later went on. Jesse Colin Young he was working with, and he had a very close relationship with Jesse. I've got personal letters between Michael and his mother, Fran, talking about, Jesse, that very nice young man, came to stay, for the weekend. So a lot of the same session players on Jesse's album appear in Kiss circles, as they were Michael's go-to studio cats. So I've tried to work some of that. And the book concludes with a section that now has 2 columns per Daniel's instructions, with the interviews that I've done with Michael James Jackson. And obviously, I did it was quite a process to interview Michael. Multiple calls. He was usually in his car going to Whole Foods or doing a coffee run, or some such run. And it was fit me in whenever we could, and we would pick up, have these conversations. And I was able to do, I think thanks to Keith at the Indie Expo, do the Q&A with him in 2018. And so I've worked some of that material in as well into my interview with him. The only thing I lack from Michael James Jackson, really, I never had a photograph with him. Prior to his Q&A on the Kiss cruise, I'd prepared him for that. Keith did a wonderful interview with him that day, one of the best interviews. He said that was the best interview he'd ever done. He felt really prepared, ready to go. I take that personally, that I had suitably prepped him, and Keith, hit him with the perfect questions, as did the audience, making it a really wonderful occasion for everyone involved. I then escorted him, walked with him to the Kiss show. I think it was the second one, because that was the one I got thrown out of after my photo pass expired. I never got a photo with him. And he was such a marvelous gentleman, so well-spoken, just unbelievable. So there we are. That's just a little bit more follow-up to a project that I am excited to see get out there to the public this week. Again, it's been a very tough few years working on Aceland. For the amount of time, it's far exceeded what I thought the investment and effort was going to be for that book. And now that we've lost Ace, trying to wrap up those sections that we needed him for has really been stressful. So to get this one kind of out of the way, but also out there, and not compete with anything that Pop House or others may have planned, as far as I know, is important to me. I don't want to be stepping on other creators' toes. Martin Popoff has his new Kiss 76 book out, and I'll be interviewing him this coming week. So Kiss Army, we're still working for you. Pop House is really finding its stride and working with Universal to bring us 2 box sets in 2025, Live and Dressed to Kill, and I think they did a great job of that. We had an Off the Soundboard relaunching that series, which was wonderful. The incredible books that have been included in both of those box sets are amazing. Kiss authors, Joey Casater, the drummers of Kiss, he did that book. As I just mentioned, Martin and his Kiss 76 book. There are other authors who are also working on things that hopefully we'll see. Destroyer fanzine going into the English language for the magazine is a great thing. There's so much out there still celebrating this band that we love. Forget the brand. You like that stuff, great. But for those of us who only care about the band, the history, its music, and all of that, there's still so much happening. There's still so much new information being uncovered. And long may that be the case, because that's all we've got now are the memories. And those are the most valuable assets that you really can't put a price on. And for those going to the Indie Expo, that's also what it's about, the people. So thanks for checking out the show yesterday and this not so quick follow-up. And thanks to you always for your support of the podcast, for the projects that I work on, projects that I'm a part of, which you don't necessarily know about. But thank you also for being friends and colleagues and peers in a crazy Kiss community. We really do represent the madness of modern life. Peace out.